Good afternoon. My name is Burress, and this is my senior project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I went about my project today and the direction that the paper started, and a little bit about, and really focus in on my interviews and how it changed the direction of the paper. Originally, I started my paper focusing on schools and school boards and their liability if they weren't going to take further action to prepare for active shooter drills. It was my belief that you no longer could take this approach of, well, that happens only certain places, and it would never happen here. Those have become so regular that I believe every school has been put on notice. So my focus was again on liability. And if you don't do anything, at what point are you liable for not taking an action, a more proactive action? And I did a lot of research, and I focused on what kind of actions we could take so that we could show that we're doing something. Anything is better than nothing. Well, NBC Nightly News, the media, which we'll hear about again later, focused on a smart school in Indiana, published it out on their websites, and did a big news story on the NBC Nightly News. Nationwide pushing of this school. $400,000 from panic rooms, essentially, to taping off to where they couldn't be seen, to all these different options. And I thought, man, why wouldn't somebody want that? That's state of the art, and it's awesome. That'll get the job done. That's a couple $1,000s to fix that problem for the life of your child. Surely the liability is more than that for just one child. So I prepared my interview questions focusing down that road. And I had my interview. My interview was with Mike Roth, the superintendent of the Leavenworth School District 453, and Mike Carney, president of the Leavenworth School District, or School Board, District 453. And I met, as I sat down with Mr. Roth, within 5 minutes of sitting down with him, I knew my paper was in trouble. He focused me to say that this is in a term that I understand from the military, that this wasn't a gun issue, this wasn't a school issue, this wasn't a nobody's doing anything issue. This was an insider threat issue. He focused on the fact that in almost all the school shootings that have been out there, the person doing the shooting, with the exception of one case that he called out, the person belonged there. Under whatever security standards he would have had, that person would have been allowed in. And the one case that he called out that said the kid didn't belong in that school, whatever security measure you would have put in place, he probably would have passed. Although he shot his way into the school, the security measure probably would have let him in because he was coming in to see his parents who worked at the school. So more than likely, whatever security measure would have allowed him in. When he said that it was an insider threat, I knew my paper was on the ropes and barely hanging on for life. I sat there silently for a few minutes because I wasn't sure where to really go, because so many of my questions were focused on the whole smart school and why aren't we doing something like that? Do something, anything. So I tried to stay focused, and I decided to ad-lib some of my questions on the fly in hopes that I could have plenty of material for my paper, because I clearly knew it was going to take a new direction. And I asked him about, well, how about we hear on the news that the possibility of arming teachers? Surely in Kansas, where open carry is the law of the land, and you can walk into a Walmart and see any 5 guys with pistols on their hips, and that's just normal. Everyone sees it as common. He said, let me tell you a story for why a teacher and a gun doesn't go together well. And he said, let me tell you a story about Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith is your 7th grade elementary teacher. She's been there for about 15 years. And I don't care what standard you want to put in front of that teacher to be qualified to carry that gun. Whether she needs to meet police requirements for gun owners, whether she's got to have civilian trained, whether there's a special state certifying course. He said, whatever you want to say it is, she's qualified. And she's, the 7th grade teacher, so she's seen these kids in elementary school for many years. And the day comes that the lockdown bell goes off. Mrs. Smith grabs her concealed carry and starts running around the corner to go react like she's been trained to do. And she turns the corner to zone in on her target, and it's little Johnny from 2nd period. And as she briefly stopped there to recognize the threat, and oh my God, it's little Johnny, she tried to squeeze off the round, but in the shaking hand of I can't believe it's little Johnny, she shot Mary behind him. And in the same sentence, him, not at all deterred, shot her. Now he has another gun. It was a very scary reality that I hadn't considered at all. The reality that, number one, he said, now who's liable for Mary? And then more importantly, he said, and now the shooter's got another gun. So it was clear that that's not the way to go. So the school board president chimed in this discussion and said, and don't think for a minute we haven't thought about it. He said, the elementary school here in Leavenworth already has 2 security guards. They're former police officers. They're not part of a DARE program, whatever. Their only job is contract security. And he said, our school board voted to arm those 2 police officers, or those 2 retired police officers, our security detail. He said, the superintendent told me before he could get to his office in the morning, his voicemail was blown up with parents saying, if you enact that policy, I will pull my kids out of your school. This is in a state that guns are king. And he said that the most common theme was, yeah, you've got to do something, just not that, where my kids go to school. So it became very personal when they had skin in the game versus just saying, do that. So it was a rather interesting discussion. And one by one, he went through all those ideas that NBC had on that smart school and debunked every last one of them. Why? Because the guy inside knows what's going to happen. And all it does then is turn in, remember, Columbine had 2 people. Columbine, in 1999, April 20th, had 2 shooters involved in that. And he said, we'll just end up with that again, where there'll be 2 people involved, one that gets the attention, and one is where all the people that they know they're going to be at to shoot them all up. He said, so those smart schools, a lot of money, and there's maybe some goodness, but there's bad guys do bad things. That's what they do. And that whether it's going to be there in the school, if they're going to carry out this action, they're going to carry it out. And if you make a school so locked tight that it's TSA to get in, besides the impacting learning, you're going to turn around and have bad guys do bad things. Fine, I'll wait for them to come out of the school and get on the school bus, and I'll get them then. Or I'll wait for the elementary kids to go out and play at recess, and I'll ram my car through the fence and take them all out that way. We've surely seen that cars are a weapon already these days, so it's not too far-fetched to think. And in a slide that you'll see in my slide presentation titled The Columbine Effect, 53% since Columbine have been handgun shootings. While that may seem like a lot, I'll also tell you that 18% of school violence, for lack of better terms to use there, 18% was from improvised explosive devices and explosives in general. And 14% were by a knife. The remaining percentages in the other category. So clearly, if you take the guns away, bad guys do bad things. It's what they do. They'll just move on to those other areas we talked about because they're readily accessible. We can't ban everything. And let's not forget that it's a Second Amendment right that we're arguing about. And that's why it makes it such a hot button issue, I think, because if we take one right away, how many more will fall? So after going through all this, I clearly realized my paper was in trouble, and I had a lot of extra material, so I had come up with some possible courses of action, and I started to go down a road to wrap up these interviews. And I had a couple last questions, and some of them were, at what point in time is learning impacted by this level of security, or what layer of security. And both of them agreed that when you make it be TSA, that they have to go through TSA every day to come to school, learning will be impacted. And even then, you're not guaranteed it's safe. At some point, we turned my focus to the media as a question that I left, it was one of my last ones. And he said the media is probably where you really should be looking for your paper. The media has a large culpability in this problem. The media is not helping us at all. In my paper, I refer to the modern era of school shootings to be post-1996. And why post-1996? Simply because in 1980, CNN debuted. In 1996, Fox News debuted and became a direct competitor and thus launched the constant 24-hour cycle news. And the bleeds it leads content began. And during all this time, you've got Columbine started at April 20th, 1999, showing that there's no level of where this risk is at. Virginia Tech University, April 16, 2007, 32 killed, 17 injured. Sandy Hook Elementary, even the little kids at risk. 14 December 2012, 26 dead, 2 injured. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, the most recent large shooting in Florida that garnered a lot of media attention. 17 dead, 17 wounded. Every last one of them made a hero unintentionally out of the shooters. Shooter or shooters in Columbine's case. Because people that wanted to make attention, wanted their 15 minutes of fame, used the most recent guy to say, I can do better than that guy, and would post things about them and point to the fact that that's why they were doing it. They were going to draw, they were going to be their hero, they were going to be bigger than their hero, larger than life. So I think the media does have some culpability in there, because while everyone has a historical reference on who these shooters were and all those that I just told you, nobody can tell me some of the names of the victims, because that didn't bleed, that didn't lead. The shooter is what led. So as I get ready to wrap on this part, I want to leave you with the cliffhanger of where my paper ended up. Yes, I do believe the media had some play. And yes, I do believe that the solution lies partly with the media, although I will tell you that the superintendent and the school board president told me where they think that the solution lies as well. And I think the solution is somewhere in the middle. But I leave it as a cliffhanger because I want you to read my paper, and I want you to read it open-minded to realize that I struggled as I went down the road to make sure that if I wasn't willing to take someone's Second Amendment right away, I had to be very careful not to tread on a different amendment. Now, while some will say take guns away, that clearly violates the Second Amendment. Some of my courses of action might impact some other amendments, but it doesn't remove them. And I think at some point in time, as we've learned in other countries, our minor children need to be insulated and need to not be so insensitized from some of the actions going on out in public today. And we shouldn't make a hero of a 13-year-old unless that hero is saving lives, not taking them. So I look forward to you reading my paper. I thank you for your time. It's been a great class to be involved in, and I'm real close to finishing my degree, and I'm really looking forward. 2 classes to go. Thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon.